Remember that meme of the guy unwrapping a gift and it ends up being the same shirt he's already wearing? These days, phone launchers can sometimes seem a bit like that, at least superficially. So as the Nothing Phone 2 arrives, is this yet another case of same shirt, different day? To answer that question, you have to take the time to actually use it and see how the Nothing Phone and the company itself has grown in the year since that first handset. I'm Alex Dobie, this is XDA TV, and this is our review of the Nothing Phone 2. So at a glance, from a distance, the Nothing Phone 1 and Phone 2 seem almost like the same device. You need to come in closer to appreciate what's changed in Nothing's flagship offering for 2023. It's ever so slightly larger, mainly on the vertical, and just a hair thinner too. That extra svelteness combined with the curved back makes a pretty substantial difference to how the phone feels in your hand. The Phone 1 was almost identical to the iPhone Pro Max series in terms of footprint and hand feel, but the Phone 2 packs what Nothing calls a pillowed glass back panel, and this soft, subtle curve makes its larger 6.7-inch display fit more comfortably while also helping with grip when you're one-handing it without a case. I also think the curve here helps to emphasize the depth effect of the layered components underneath the glass, which of course remains the central design feature of this and most other Nothing products. The two widely sold colors are white and dark grey, and the grey is a good deal brighter than the murdered out black of the Phone 1, meaning all these tiny components are a little easier to see and appreciate. It's a style that's very much unique to this company, showing precise machining and attention to detail. Once again, Nothing isn't just building its phone in the usual way and slapping a transparent back on it. The components that are visible here are designed to be seen. The glyph lights, of course, were the other iconic design feature of the Phone 1, and the most noticeable change this time around is the splitting of these lights into segments. That's partially a stylistic change, but also speaks to the extra functionality backing up this array of cyberpunk-styled LEDs. As well as syncing up with your notification sounds and acting as a charging LED as before, the lights can now show and do more. They've been opened up to third-party apps now, so if you call an Uber or order food through Deliveroo, a section of the glyph interface will show you the remaining progress of your ride or your grub. If you're changing the volume while the screen is off, the light here acts as a volume indicator, and there's a glyph timer feature that works in a similar way. A common thread running through all these glyph features is letting you do more with your phone and see glanceable information without actually picking it up and exposing yourself to countless digital distractions. But if you do want to be digitally distracted, then you'll definitely want to check out the Glyph Composer feature. This is exactly what it sounds like, a way to create your own ringtones matched with the glyph light pattern. There are 5 sound packs to choose from initially, ranging from the mechanical to the percussive and harmonic. All of these changes are part of Nothing OS 2. Turns out Nothing has been pretty busy over the past year building on the solid but sometimes less polished foundations that shipped in OS 1 last year. Like Nothing's earlier software, the new OS is layered upon the canvas of stock Android. But unlike those first few builds of Phone 1 firmware, this is absolutely rock solid. No significant bugs that I noticed, no slowdown or stutters, just effortless smoothness, and a visual style that still feels differentiated and special while evoking a vanilla Android aesthetic. In fact, when you first start up the Phone 2, you can choose whether to use the Nothing design language or stock Android as your starting point, and from there customize it as you please. I ended up going with a look that I think combines the best of both, a larger grid and no app labels, but with plenty of Nothing's excellent first-party Android widgets. These cover the usual things like weather and clock, as well as quick settings and of course Nothing's own audio gear. Something else to touch on with these widgets is how some of them can be transplanted over to the lock screen and always on display, giving you more glanceable information when the phone is in sleep mode, which then springs to life when the lock screen wakes up. Pretty neat. Meanwhile, subtle tweaks to Android's app folders let you give them fun little themed icons and expand them to double size. And if you prefer a starker look in keeping with Nothing's contrasty design language, you can switch your apps to the Nothing Icon Pack, which enforces an aggressive monochrome look. If you're not a huge fan of these visuals, you can just not use most of them, but I've come to appreciate the way the Phone 2 lets you have as much or as little of the Nothing Phone design language as you want. Let's briefly talk specs, because while they sometimes feel secondary to the appeal of a phone like this, they do illustrate why this thing costs £179 more than its predecessor. The jump up to a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is huge for raw performance compared to the old 778G. It's not the very latest Qualcomm chip, but it's still a fantastic performer and almost as quick and efficient as the latest Gen 2. And RAM and storage comes in at 8 plus 128 all the way up to 12 plus 512. I'm using the mid-tier model with 12 plus 256. The display is a new 6.7-inch panel, once again at Full HD Plus resolution with 120Hz and up to 1600 nits of peak brightness, putting it in the same ballpark as Samsung's flagship S23 series. In my testing, this display was easily viewable in bright or overcast daylight, even with the bundle screen protector, and the slimmer bezels compared to the Phone 1 are a subtle but appreciated upgrade. Unlike the first Nothing phone, this screen is an extra fancy LTPO panel, so when it needs to, it can clock down to just 1 Hz to save power. Speaking of which, there's a bigger battery to boot at 4700 mAh, which powers the Phone 2 to an easy full day of use with around 6 to 6.5 hours of screen on time with my usage patterns. That's slightly less than I get out of a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 powered flagship with a 5000 mAh cell, but still a very respectable showing. And when you consider that charging rates have been up to 45 watts, it's always pretty easy to get back up to speed if you find yourself in the battery danger zone. Wireless charging, by the way, remains unchanged at 15 watts. And there's no charger in the box, but you do get this stylish, partially translucent USB-C cable to wow your friends with. The other major area where you'd expect to see improvements in a more expensive sequel is the cameras. And that's definitely the case with the Phone 2, but the reason why has just as much to do with processing as it does with optical upgrades. On the hardware side, the Phone 2 still packs twin 50MP sensors, but the primary has gotten an upgrade to Sony's IMX890. That's a refresh of the similarly sized IMX766 from the Phone 1. And for the ultra-wide, nothing stays with Samsung's tried and true JN1. So the Phone 1 was a dependable shooter, and the same is true for Phone 2, but the extra year in Nothing's camera labs, combined with new image processing algorithms, makes for a markedly improved camera experience. The Phone 2's camera takes 8 exposures at once when shooting HDR versus 3 in the Phone 1. That makes for more evenly exposed shots in tougher lighting conditions. And in addition to that, the Phone 2's camera was routinely able to capture more fine detail than its predecessor. This is especially noticeable when using digital zoom. With the older phone, shots at 2 times would quickly become blurry, whereas the Phone 2 can punch in all the way up to 5 times and you still have a decent enough shot that you could share on social media. As for overall image quality, Nothing's photos occupy a happy medium that's not as flat as you often get from the iPhone on default settings, but also not as excessively saturated as some Samsung photos. Even in tricky backlit shots, I felt confident in Nothing's ability to pull out an evenly exposed image with accurate white balance. If I have one criticism of this camera right now, it's that sometimes it has a tendency to produce a little bit of HDR haloing around a skyline in shots like this. This kind of thing is handled a bit more adeptly by other flagship cameras like the king of HDR that is Google's Pixel series. Also, while portrait mode was generally reliable with people, including decent edge detection around hair, its depth sensing capabilities are limited to just that. Statues or animals or the like don't really play nice with this portrait mode. As far as the ultra-wide goes, Nothing captures a nice dramatic field of view here, and colours were consistent across both the wide and ultra-wide cameras. Even this photo shot here while moving was pretty impressive considering the level of dynamic range in this alleyway. And crucially for an ultra-wide, I didn't notice any increase in noise or distortion around the edges of the frame when shooting in less than ideal lighting. Night photography in general is decent from the Phone 2, with ample brightness and low noise in scenes lit by streetlight or darker rooms at night. In my experience, the one thing you lose with this camera compared to more expensive models in darker scenes is a little bit of extra shadow and color detail. That said, these are still really good looking night shots. Video-wise, the Phone 2 also performs well in its price segment, with decent software stabilization augmenting the OIS of the main camera at 4K 30. The main camera also exhibited slightly better dynamic range in video mode versus the ultra-wide, which crossed shadows just a little bit in certain scenes. And while harsh motion from fast walking shots could be picked up in footage from the ultra-wide in some situations, generally I was more than happy with the image quality and stabilization on offer from both of these video cameras. So yeah, for the price, these cameras give you everything you'd need. The only thing you could possibly ask for towards the upper end of the Phone 2's price range is telephoto, but the digital zoom from the main shooter is at the level where I don't think most people will miss it. In closing, it's worth reflecting on something kind of fun and maybe a bit salient about the codenames of Nothing's first two handsets, which reference to the earliest video games. The Phone 1 was called Space War, and Phone 2 is Pong. Everyone knows Pong, the landmark Atari title that was huge in the 70s and 80s and is often incorrectly believed to be the first true video game. The actual first game was Space War, a more obscure cosmic blaster developed in the early 60s that used an oscilloscope as its display. Space War was first technically, but Pong was the commercial trailblazer that everyone remembers. And I wonder if that codename tells us something about how Nothing sees this phone's place in the narrative of its company history. Space War was first last year, yet Pong feels like it might be the one that people actually remember and look back on as a milestone. Between the wider US launch, the expanded glyph functionality, and the more polished software, that's certainly what it feels like. So to slide back into our original metaphor briefly, is this same shirt, different day? I really don't think it is. For one, the Phone 1 is sticking around in the markets where it was originally sold at a lower price. Phone 2, with its greater horsepower, slicker design, improved camera, and longer software support, occupies a different spot higher up Nothing's lineup. And in each of these critical categories, it does more than enough to justify that price premium, while also pushing the envelope enough to tempt Phone 1 owners with a selection of tasty upgrades. I'm fascinated to see what comes after Pong and Space War, maybe a Mario or even a Sonic. With the Phone 2, Nothing has proven it can deliver value in the $600 or $700 arena just as much as the $400 or $500 mark. And it's sure going to be interesting to see where that publicity, experience, and fanbase, backed up by several bathtubs of VC money, can lead the company in the coming years. That's it for now. Let me know what you think of the Nothing Phone 2 down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more reviews like this one, we really appreciate it. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.